Hey there, and thanks for joining us for the Weekly Grind, a podcast where we work out the topics that shape and influence the culture, community, and church of today from a biblical perspective. My name is Ben, and I'm joined with my pastor and good friend Chip. He is a lead pastor, and I am the worship pastor at the Napoleon Church of the Nazarene here in Napoleon, Ohio. Today on the podcast, we'll share a little bit about ourselves and why we decided to even start a podcast. We'll also check in on those New Year's resolutions you made a few months back and check up and see how you're doing with those. So this is the Weekly Grind. All right, well, Chip, today is the day of something new. Today is the day that we are embarking on a new adventure of podcasting.
Wow.
Episode 1. And it's something that we're probably going to fumble our way through today.
Yeah.
But we want it to be fun. We want it to be enjoyable, and hopefully it's enjoyable to listen to as much as it is to do. But in this episode, we're really talking about all things new, right? That's kind of the heart of this episode. I think it kind of works through the seasons of life that we're going through right now as well. Yeah. Each of us are in a unique season, and I think you can say that a lot of times, but maybe we kind of moved into different age demographics this year, so it's really brought about a lot of contemplation and thinking about.
Unfortunately for me, it's not the same as yours, but...
No, I'm a solid decade behind you.
That's right.
So I turned 30 this year. You turned 40.
Yeah.
I've got a little one at home now, 6 months old. My wife and I had him last September. So that's new. That's exciting.
I'm on the verge of, in 2 months, having my first teenager. So
yeah, that'll be big.
Well, that might come up in conversations on our podcast.
Let me know. But with this first podcast, really, we just, how do you guys do with new? That's kind of one of the things that we're asking with it. We are a quarter of the way in to 2019. We have New Year's resolutions maybe that we have made. Maybe we remember them, maybe not.
Do you remember your New Year's resolution?
I don't even know if I made one this year. I feel like I just kind of... let's just figure out being a dad. That was my resolution this year. But I'm a rhythm guy, so that's a big thing for me, is just finding that new rhythm that I can be productive in. But yeah, what's up with your New Year's resolution?
Well, yeah, turning 40... seems like everybody who gets to that point starts to really do an evaluation of your life. And I did. Evaluating my personal life, my relationships, my professional life, and just felt like God was speaking into me about making the most out of this decade that's coming.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things I've really, the first 3 months, really jumped into is my personal life, just working on my physical. And so I am a CrossFitter now, and there's many mornings that I wake up sore, but, I just want to be intentional about getting in shape in this decade so that when I approach my 50s, my 60s, I've taken care of my body in the best way possible. But yeah, you talk about stretching yourself, and I had no idea what I was getting into.
That's probably a good thing.
I really didn't. Yeah, you're right. I don't think I would have probably taken that
because I know
leap.
I'm considering doing it because you've told me about it, but you've told me a lot about it, and so I don't even know if I want to. I need to try it.
Fine.
I need to try it.
And you would love it. There is something to it that it kind of grabs hold of you a little bit. But yeah, just living into those new things. Already I feel like in this year you can look at my life and see differences. And that's what I want to do in my 40s, so to speak. So not just a new year for me, but a new decade.
Yeah.
So this is a really relevant podcast to me. Like I'm living into this right now. So
Right.
news a big word for me right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And Paul even talks about that. I mean, you've got something to share today. I mean,
Yeah.
the whole idea of this podcast is to bring kingdom perspective into the real life things that we're
right.
going through.
Yeah.
And he's pretty clear and encouraging
Yeah.
about new things and being forward focused.
Yeah.
And about that. So
Yeah.
you know, what
I gravitated toward what he said about new things. I mean, you look at his life, obviously someone we all look up to.
Yeah.
The scriptures tell us that he said, "Follow me as I follow Christ." And I was just taken back in Philippians chapter 3 when he kind of gives us an insider view of how he approached life and how he thought through and approached new things. In Philippians chapter 3, he's kind of just reminded his readers of who he was, where he came from, how much he had accomplished. But then he also realized that none of that really mattered when he came to Jesus. His whole mindset changed. His whole approach to life changed. He realized this wasn't that valuable, really, and I lived life for so long rushing after this and pushing after that. But then he realized with Christ in my life, I see things so different. And I just think it's interesting, if you read what he said in Philippians chapter 3, how did Paul approach everyday life? And he says this, verse 12, "Not that I've already attained all this or have already been made perfect." I mean, Paul, all that he was able to accomplish and experience, I think most of us would have been probably pretty arrogant and, lived on the fact that I did this, I accomplished this.
Yeah. I
mean, you're kind of ready just to retire and kind of just rest on your laurels, so to speak.
Right.
Paul didn't live that way.
He definitely, if anybody earned it, it was him.
He did. Amazing stuff. And yet his mindset is, I don't live in that, and I don't think that I've arrived, and I'm not going to rest in what has happened. He said, I press on to take hold of that which Christ Jesus took hold of me. And this is really what I think is captivating for us to keep in our mind. Just these short phrases. I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal. And just so Paul's going to use athletic language, right? He would do this often, but it's kind of the idea here of a sprinter. And he's saying, listen, as a sprinter, you can't reach the finish line in the best time possible or even in the most efficient way if you're looking back, right? Mm-hmm. And he said, I do not live my life looking over my shoulder. I don't live in my past. And that's one thing I think he's telling us, he's teaching us, that we learn from our past, but we don't live in our past. For him, it was good. Well, so for Paul, it was like he did have the good, bad, and the ugly, right? His life before Christ, his life after Christ, he had tremendous highs, tremendous lows, but none of that mattered. And he didn't live dwelling in the past.
Right.
And as a runner,
he made some serious errors.
Yeah.
And but he didn't.
He didn't let that affect him. The fact that he had actually been a persecutor of Christians. Mm-hmm. And as a runner, if you want your best time and if you want to win, where do your eyes have to be?
Yeah, they need to be set ahead.
Yeah.
Straight ahead.
I mean, I watched it. Sage, for instance, in swimming, she's a good swimmer, but there's sometimes in races where she starts to peek over at the next lane. Mm-hmm. And you can just see her momentum slow down as she's not focused on the end line. Yeah. And that's what Paul's saying. Listen, I live my life every day with this kind of mindset that I am always looking ahead. Yeah. And the past has reminded me that God's faithful, that God's sufficient, God provides. Mm-hmm. But I don't live dwelling in that. And I also don't live dwelling in the poor decisions I made, how I maybe messed up my life. I'm just moving forward. And I'm realizing new day, God is always living in the new day.
Yeah.
And the word like straining forward, it's this word of stretch. And then it's compounded in the language to say, I stretch. I stretch myself. And so there's great intentionality. And I think this passage just reminded me really clearly in my life as I'm reaching 40, in your life as you're 30, new dad, for you to experience the new things that God has for you at its best potential, it's going to take intentionality. I'm not just going to fall into realizing all that God has for me. I need to keep a mindset of forgetting what's behind, pressing forward to what's ahead. And I just think embracing the new and realizing that I have got to be super intentional about the new is the way to live into the preferred future that God has for us.
Yeah. A few months ago, you encouraged me to stretch a little bit.
Yeah.
You and Ken were both gone on. Seeing family is great, but Sunday's always coming. And so you guys were both gone. I had an opportunity to preach, which is definitely not a muscle I exercise as much here with the different strengths that we all have.
So you're kind of voluntold?
A little bit. That's, a little voluntold to do that. But one of the, a lot of my sermon though was over this, was over pushing ourselves and doing new things and God wanting to, it was December 30th. It was the last Sunday and you and your wisdom in your 40s now, something you learned in your 30s is that you don't preach in the Sunday after
No way.
Christmas. And so I had the opportunity to do that. And one of the, so this was a topic, and one of the supplemental resources that I used was a TED Talk, and the guy that did it, he talked about these different areas, and a lot of this you can find these themes and these threads in Scripture, but he talks about moving into a life of complexity rather than comfort. We all strive for comfort. It's amazing the amount of money that we spend on comfort, whether it's heating and air conditioning, whether it's a new bed, a new sofa, the food that we eat.
Leather seats in the car.
Heated seats.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's crazy the amount of money that we spend on comfort. And he says, listen, stagnation happens during comfort. There is no growth that happens. Growth happens when we're pushing ourselves into an area of complexity, is what he calls it, and that's so true. And so set your sights ahead, set goals, set your eye on the prize, move forward with that. I think that's what we're doing here with this podcast. Yeah. I think that's what we're doing here in our own lives.
So can I call CrossFit complexity now?
Yeah, that's definitely pushing you in. Because one of the things you were telling me is that even the guys that have done it for years, I mean, you guys are all dead tired at the end. Yeah. It's not like you've arrived. No. And I think that's one of the things we can fall into as believers is, hey, I've arrived. I've done these things. Paul, of anybody, could have done that, but even we are tempted to do that. I do this. I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with the amount that I give. I'm comfortable with the amount that I serve. I'm comfortable with the amount of time that I invest or whatever it is. And Paul's saying, no, continue to strive, continue to stretch forward. And I think that's definitely a kingdom perspective and mindset that we need to keep today.
And God has a preferred future for you.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
He is not just, okay, you've reached this level, you're all right. Mm-hmm. He keeps wanting to stretch us because he realizes the potential in our lives and the purpose and the meaning he wants to work in us. And so there is a sense where he's always trying to pull us into the new thing. And am I going to be intentional about embracing that And yeah, it is complex.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. I guess that's what I'm going to start calling it when I come home after CrossFit. And I'm just going to say I'm living in the complexity. And the complexity is I didn't even know I had these certain muscles in my body that are hurting me right now, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's definitely stretching me. But you know what? Already in 3 months, I am so happy that I've been doing this.
Yeah.
And the way that I feel and the way that my body's responding, I can't go back to what I did in my 30s when I kind of took my 30s off.
Yeah.
And just rested on good genetics and I was still young. I wouldn't even want to go back there now. Like, this has already spoiled me for taking care of my body. And so pushing into that complexity, it's a wonderful place to be.
Yeah.
Experiencing the new things that God has. So,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. And again, that kind of leads into this podcast and why we decided to do this. It's pretty cool because, I really kind of felt a leading. Okay, let me back up. So we're both interested in politics. We like that, and there's some big cultural things going on right now.
Yeah.
And I kind of had this conviction. It's like Ben, I've given you a voice and a platform, whatever that is. Like you are responsible to speaking into this. Yeah. And really that's what this podcast seeks to do is there's things that we don't always get into on Sunday mornings.
That's right.
Or maybe it's a conversation that is bigger than Sunday morning and we need to revisit. Yeah. And so that's really the heart of this podcast.
Absolutely.
The weekly grind. So each week is the goal to have a new podcast out. Also, I love coffee, man. So that's kind of
right.
where that came from. But life can be a grind, and so it's kind of it's a play on that. It's a fun play on that. But
in sports, we both are sports guys. There'll be sports references. I mean, there's going to be some podcasts where we're going to talk about sports as an intro.
We've got one planned coming up here soon that
you'll want to see that.
Can be pretty polarizing.
But like the idea in sports of learning how to grind, learning how to improve yourself and to push yourself to be a better athlete, or how to grind it out as a team to reach a goal. And so I love the title of our podcast, the name of it. I think it encapsulates a lot of things that we love. Yeah, and definitely. Yet, you're right, man. There are so many social issues, culture issues that we need to speak into. And our hope is that maybe as you watch this, it just causes your mind to move out of maybe the mainstream sources that are always trying to tell you how to think, and to just once again be brought back to what is the biblical perspective? Right. What is the kingdom thinking on these issues? As a believer, what should I think? Yeah. And that's just our hope. We will be thrilled. I mean, we'll be ecstatic if this podcast can stimulate thinking in your life toward a kingdom mindset and perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. Well, this wraps up our first podcast.
We made it.
We made it
through one, at least.
We made it through. But really, just the heart of using this to stimulate biblical conversation. Getting back to the political part of it, Jesus wasn't a Republican or a Democrat, and there is a third way, and it's the kingdom way.
That's right.
And it's the most important way. And so these podcasts, most of them at least, will be used to stimulate and to be able maybe to add value and a different perspective to the conversations that you hear around the water cooler, around at work, and on the news. So
I'm excited. Yeah, I'm not thrilled about being on video, but I'm excited about doing this, and I think it's going to be a great journey for us.